thank you so much. Heidi and I are old friends. Not the oldest of my friends in the room. There are a lot of people in the room I've known for a long time. We put it all together. The number of years we've all known one another would exceed any Mayan calendar, this one or the next one. Pyle and I met in '66, and Tia and I in '67. But Heidi and I have known each other for many years, long enough that I would have thought you wouldn't have to flatter me like that, but that's very, very sweet.
Well, you gave me the check.
No, you're going to give me the check. I do want to say how lucky we are to have such a talented butterfly teacher among us. A bunch of us are teachers. To have Heidi doing the courses that she does and to have her graduates here is especially delightful. And Heidi, I congratulate you on all you do as a butterfly ambassador, and that keeps the group alive and it keeps the study of butterflies and their enjoyment alive, so thank you. It's not that I like this group, this is my favorite group there is, with possible exception of the Xerces Society. I stand before you possibly with the first necktie that's ever been worn at one of these meetings, with a sports shirt. But the reason I do is because I had to show off my one souvenir from China, which is my silk panda tie from the extraordinary silk market and silk factory that we visited, and that was in Shanghai, wasn't it? I think the pearl and jade markets were in Beijing, I think, but I think the silk market. And these places are pretty much obligatory to visit, but it's no great ordeal to have to do so. Our group wasn't very responsive in terms of buying very much in the way of jade and silk, but I bought my panda tie at least, so I had to wear it. Now, I also stand before you as a person who is certainly a novice in what I'm going to talk to you about. I don't know a great deal about the butterflies of China. I know a heck of a lot more than I did a year ago. But, and I was only in China for 17 days. It's completely unexpected. So please don't think that, I mean, the title itself is absurdly hubristic, but they are butterflies and they are of China. And so I shall begin. Now, by the way, I'll simply say my co-authors for this paper, as you can see who they are, they're 6 of the, how many were we, Tia? 15? 15 on the trip. Dr. Pyle is one of the most revered and properly so lepidopterists in the world. He's the author of the Peterson Eastern and Western Field Guides and the Moths of Western North America with Jerry Pyle and a great deal more. We owe vast amounts to Pyle as a scholar, so I'm very honored to be co-authoring this paper with my good old friend Pyle. I did assemble this particular PowerPoint largely from his materials and my materials and Janet Chu's materials, as well as photographs from Aphie Buckner Oppler and Asa Hurst, who is one of Jan Chu's grandsons. I'll tell you more about how the trip took place in just a moment, but I want to make that clear. And this is a predecessor to a program that I have to deliver at the Lepidoptera Society in Denver in 12 minutes, with 3 minutes for questions. You know it has to happen because they cut you right off. And I actually have been on time for most of my Lovesock papers, unlike most others. So you're not getting out of here in 12 minutes. I'm shooting for breakfast. This is going to have to be kept down dramatically. And I also want to say that I'd love to share a great deal more of the cultural and architectural and landscape aspects with you, with photographs from all the different people. I'm the only one on the trip who took no photographs. So I'm using the photographs of others. But I can't do that, of course, when we're concentrating on the butterflies. I also want to recognize that we do have a person from China, from a beautiful city that we visited, Kunming, and your name is Lisa, is that correct?
Yes.
It's probably not pronounced quite right, but...
Oh, no, that's my English name.
Yes, of course.
My Chinese name is Hui.
Hui.
That's a much better name.
Thanks for being with us, Hui, and feel free to correct me at any time, please.
You get 12 minutes on the title.
My 12 minutes is up, is that what you said? It's about true. So I wore my jacket for you, and there it goes. surprised that Tia and I were able to take this trip. We had not had any idea of ever being able to go to China. But Janet Chu, a dear friend of ours, and a great naturalist, and the leader of a number of butterfly counts in Colorado, author of a marvelous book on the butterflies of Boulder County, put together this trip. She had been to China a number of times. Her late husband, Raymond Chu, was a Chinese man who was in the Chinese Air Force at the end of the war. And rather than continue, he left at the end of the war and came to this country. And a little bit more about that family later on. His father was personal secretary to Chiang Kai-shek. So Janet had a deep connection with China in revolutionary times, and has been back a number of times with Ray to reunions, Air Force reunions, and so on and so forth. But she had never been able to put together the sort of natural history trip that she so desired. Are you okay over there? There are seats with a better view of the screen probably. If you...
This is fine.
Okay. So we were deeply honored by Jan to be invited to come along on the China trip as guests and to take part in the interpretation and teaching of butterflies and the surveys that we did. This was Jan's name for the trip. We had the great honor of meeting Dr. Chu Eo, the editor of the Butterflies of China, which was unusual because he's been dead these many years. This is a wax sculpture of him, actually. At the museum at the institute that he founded, it's in Woman. And Dr. Chu Eo is responsible for this paper and for anything. We're planning on submitting a paper to the journal Whole Arctic Lepidoptera with our findings when we finish them. But it would have been impossible to do this at all without his great monograph on the butterflies of China. And I couldn't have done what I've done with this if John Pelham hadn't tipped me off to where a copy of that could be found in the Northwest, which is not in the Suzalo Library, but it's in the Asian Library in Condon Hall. And I spent many, many hours with it there, and it was extraordinarily helpful. Paul has access to some other resources as well, but many of the resources are difficult to find and were very recently published and expensive, or not in English, certainly, but often not even with the Latin in Roman script, or italic script, so it's difficult without that book. Anyway, this is the man to whom everyone owes the greatest portion of the study of Chinese butterflies. There have been many other lepidopterists who have contributed, of course. We had the honor of visiting the institute that Dr. Chu Eo set up in Yangling, which is in Shaanxi province, not terribly far from Xi'an, where the marvelous clay soldiers are. I did visit, but I will not be showing you. And visiting with a number of the entomologists on the staff at the Entomological Institute. It's a superb building, stunning exhibitions and great collections, and a wonderful butterfly garden as well, which featured strictly local butterflies. So we have included a few species that we saw only in the butterfly garden because they were local and they certainly occur in that district. Paul Oppler is the other Yank with the cap on there, and Janet Chu is on the left. Gifts were exchanged. My gift was a marvelous scorpion in plasticine. Our conversations and our scientific exchange was certainly limited by language, but it was productive and it was fruitful. And by the way, let me just say that the woman second from the right, and I can't pronounce her name, or do I recall it at the moment, though we're hoping to be a co-author on this paper. She's making a study of the butterflies of the Xinling Mountains, which was our most productive and wonderful place. And so we're hoping to be able to exchange manuscripts and photographs, but it is a challenge with the language.
Last name wouldn't be Zhang, would it?
Pardon?
Zhang?
You know, I believe it is.
No.
Have you seen publications of hers?
Many, yeah.
Good, wonderful. She was wonderful. So many of the best photographs came from Afi Buckner Oppler, Paul's wife, and a lot of others from Asa Hurst, the youngest of Jan's grandsons who were along. Want to recognize them. And Tia took many of the other photographs and Paul took some of them, so on. This was our schedule. As you see, we covered a lot of ground and a lot of air. Most of the transport in the big distances, of course, was by air, but not all. Certainly some long trips by bus and some by other vehicles. And a lot on foot, I'm happy to say. I want to point out in particular, of course we flew into Beijing, on down to Xi'an and saw the clay soldiers and some habitats, but then out to the Xinling Mountains, which are one of a number of panda preserves, one of the smaller, but one of the wilder of the panda preserves, and probably one of the best managed. And from there on down to Guiyang and to Kunming, which as you see is awfully close to the borders of a number of Southeast Asian countries, including Myanmar and Laos and Vietnam. And on up to a place that has many names. The formal name that's been adopted is Shangri-La by the town council and the Chamber of Commerce. That name surely arose in that part of the world. It's unclear where it originally applied, but it was not originally from James Hilton's book, Paradise Lost. It was a name on the landscape, and it has been applied to this city, but we also found it on maps under all of these names. When you come into the airport, Shangri-La is the name that you're received by. But that's this area. It's in the Tibetan portion of Yunnan, and in fact, all of the culture, architecture, language, almost entirely, is Tibetan. Of course, there's a strong Han presence as well as other minorities as well, but it's very near the actual Tibetan border, and it's in the outermost precincts of the southeast foothills of the Himalaya Massif, and that was where we were able to go quite high. So you can see that we covered a lot of different kinds of habitats, and then back to Shanghai. Now, the major places that we were on the ground studying the butterflies, there were habitats everywhere we went, but particularly in the Xinling Mountains for 5 days, plus the day in and the day out, and then for another 5 days around Zhangdian or Shangri-La. When we got to that part of the world, as you can see, the mountain ranges are extremely ramified there and complicated. There's Tibet, Myanmar, Yunnan, Sichuan is up here. And this is where an extraordinary area where several major Asian rivers all have their roots in the outflow of the Himalaya. And this is tell me if I've got these wrong, this is the Mekong, this is the Nu, and this is is it the Yangtze or the Yellow? Yangtze, that's what I thought, yes, thank you. And they all run parallel at first, and with enormous high snowy ridges between them. So biogeographically, this is an extraordinarily interesting area. And this is the area that we were able to explore to some extent, particularly the Patatuo National Park. And the snow mountain that was known as, name's escaping me right now. And of course we paid attention to the cultural aspects a great deal. This is a monastery in the town called Shangri-La, with the largest prayer wheel in the world, apparently, they say. And it takes any number of people to turn the great wheel and to turn the prayer wheel around. And there were at least 2 species of small satyr butterflies flying around that we were unable to apprehend and never did identify, because you can't whip your butterfly net out in a situation like that. So we were not insensible to the cultural and architectural aspects of China, of course, and we spent time in the Forbidden City and lots of other wonderful shrines. And the Forbidden City was particularly, I have no idea why Jeremy's in that posture. That young man broke hearts all across Asia. We had a little chant.
That's what he's doing right there, breaking a heart.
I think so, yeah. We had a little chant when he'd come back on the bus, and another one bites, and another one bites, and another one bites. And all of our translators and other people, he spoke some Chinese. And as I say, a lot of hearts were broken. But this is a particularly significant building, since I need to show you at least a building in the Forbidden City. Gorgeous, wonderful, exhausting place. Because Jeremy and Asa are grandchildren. Their grandchild is actually Ray. Janet's late husband, Ray, was the last Chinese student to be examined by the emperor.
No, his father.
Well, that's why I said they're great-grandchildren. That's right. It had to be his father. Thank you. They're the great-grandchildren. Jan's late husband's father, of course, was the last student to be examined by the emperor in this building, in the examination. So they have a particular connection here, and they had some difficulty explaining this to the young women of Asia, but they got the idea across, I think. The cultural visits commonly turned into wonderful, warm scenes. A lot of folks wanted to have their pictures taken with, I don't know if they thought I was Jerry Garcia or the other one.
You know what two-finger sign means in China, though?
I'm pretty sure it means what we mean by it, I hope.
Uh-huh.
That's my default assumption in any case. Sweet people, sweet, warm, wonderful, welcoming people everywhere we went. The food was also stunning. A word must be said about it. This was actually one of the simplest meals by far, and this was at the Panda Research Station, where all the food was grown in a tiny village nearby. Almost nothing was brought in and cooked by people who lived in this tiny village. They made a meal for us down in their village. It was one of the most extraordinary meals of my life. Generally speaking, where we would be, the tables would be heaped with 10 or 15 or 20 different kinds of dishes every meal, and almost never the same things. We kept encountering new kinds of dishes the entire time, and almost everything, with the exception of a certain cold rice roux that was popular in Western Yunnan. It was not very nice to my tongue, but almost everything was superb. And of course it had, there were some of us who ate more food than others. Not exactly in heartbreaking mode there. More like carb loading, but the food was stunning. What more can I say? It was also exquisite in style. One of the 20 or so kinds of dumplings that were served to us at this particular meal in a really wonderful hotel. And this is characteristic of the kind of care that's commonly given to food in China. I was surprised. I knew it would be good, but it was so much better than I even imagined, and a great, great pleasure. This one went on our bird list, by the way. I think it was Mandarin duck. So we went around making general nuisances of ourselves and trying to break every rule we could, and all of these signs. If there was a sign telling us not to do something, we generally did it. The relic in question here is named Joyce Gellhorn. She's a wonderful biologist in Colorado and has written the most stunning book on willow ptarmigan, if you ever have a chance to see it. She, like Tia, was largely hairless at the time, so lots of scratching went on. And here's another one that we ignored. That was actually inside the Forbidden City. The visits with people and places can't even be hinted at in their variety and the piquancy of their memories that they bring to me. But I think this picture sums them as well as anything for me. This was a boat trip in one of the water villages south of Shanghai at the very end of our trip. And this young woman was not only punting us through this fairy tale ancient stone village with canals, but was also singing to us as she did, with the loveliest voice. We did go, of course, to other major cultural sites such as the Great Wall, but while we went by and saw and stopped briefly at the parts of the wall that are commonly visited and have been reconstructed a good deal and have lots of people, and they are stunning. Our primary objective at the wall was to go to what was called the Wild Wall. And it's generally off limits, and you generally can't get there, and almost no one will take you there because it is dangerous and it's a little farther out. And our guide was terrified because it wasn't that far out of Beijing, but she had never been that far out of Beijing in her life. And it made her very nervous, and it made her even more nervous because if one of us had fallen from the broken, crumbly ramparts, it would have, of course, created difficulties. We could have been hurt or killed, and that probably would have been her job, and that would have been her opportunity to ever have a second child, which is a financial consideration. But anyway, she was very happy when she got us back into the city. But just imagine, that's the wall that has not been restored, going off and off and off, up that ridge. Can you imagine? And this is where I saw Iphlicites podalirius, a wonderful Eurasian swallowtail that I had only ever seen before in Italy. And some wonderful snakes and flowers there that one doesn't see in the more populated parts of the wall. So as soon as we could, even near the city, we started getting into the habitats that were rewarding. But it wasn't long after Xi'an, after the clay soldiers, that I should have put at least one picture of them, and I guess we've all seen them. Then we went to our single most important part of the trip, which was quite a long drive from the nearest airport up a pretty sketchy road in a good bus with a great driver to where we finally came to the Philippine National Nature Reserve, Biosphere Reserve, UNESCO Reserve, and National Park. No, it's not a national park, it's Panda Reserve. And to the simple facility at the head of the trail, and started loading up. And I was horrified when I saw the riggers, and we weren't prepared for backpacking, of course, on a trip like this. So they said, just bring your suitcases, just bring what you have, and we'll take care of it. And this is how they took care of it.
Oh my God.
The poor ponies. I felt terrible, but you know, they did it just fine. And when we got down to the panda station, most of the time they're just free and easy in the pastures, and they have a pretty good life, really. They groaned a lot, but I don't think they were mistreated. They were treated quite well, but that looks terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That is
That was
also how
me.
our food got there.
And that's how our food got there as well. And the horse is carrying this is the little bit of food that came from outside, and they were, I'm not sure why it's carrying a rock. I guess that was for balance. But do notice now, we're going down the trail, we're starting to get into the great species of cane, which is one of the two species of called bamboo there. This is the species that's the primary panda food there. And notice the blue on the right and left of the trail. There's this very pretty pale species of Corydalus that many of you may have in your garden. It's one that, who was the Heronwood guy, your friend?
Dan Hinckley.
Hmm?
Hinkley.
Dan Hinckley. It's one that he, I think, first brought back into cultivation, unless I'm mistaken. But it's everywhere in this forest. And
Well,
that's
that's just food plant.
almost certainly so, which you'll see momentarily. What species do you think?
Yeah, right.
So we're heading down this trail, and it's a concrete trail, which might surprise you in a wild area, but it was a very good choice to make this trail concrete because there's a great deal of rainfall at some times of the year. Parts of it are very steep, and it would have eroded awfully. So it's a concrete trail, and it was it 8 miles or 8 kilometers in?
5 minutes.
Yeah, 8 kilometers in. Lots of stairs. It wasn't an easy trail, but it certainly wasn't a terrible trail all the way down. And this is what it was like along the way. I couldn't believe how beautiful it got, how quickly. The air was superb. And of course, I have to say, as you know, the cities are rigorous. There are 5 cities over 30 million in China now. Oh, over 20 million, I mean to say. Chongqing's over 30 million now. And the air is challenging. So to come here and find the air superb, the water quality superb, and the extraordinarily diverse forest was a great refreshment. And to learn that it used to be a major trade route with large monasteries and a big market town. But they were bypassed. It was like a little town in the Midwest bypassed the interstate several hundred years ago. And so now there's just one little trail in and out. There are no roads into here. And everything that comes in or out comes on the back of a pony or a person. And it's been that way for a very long time, and the forest has restored itself to what I read in the report of one mammalogist who had been there on an expedition, what he considered the most diverse and the most intact temperate tropical, and that seems like a contradiction, but it's that zone where the northern temperate forest mixes with the subtropical forest that he'd ever seen in the world. That's how he described the Philippine forest. And it was stunning. Some of these bridges were fun. Some of them were actually a little challenging. They bounced a lot. Oops, sorry, wrong way. And I mentioned the water quality was high. The aquatic invertebrates were many and diverse. The amphibians were also diverse. And in some of the waters we found so many tadpoles, and we never did determine which species this was. I believe it was a frog, not a toad. That there were tens of thousands. They absolutely blackened the bottom of the stream for some distance. And it was, we did determine it was a native species, not something introduced. Wonderful waterfalls. Actually, the two boys both slid down this waterfall on the way out.
Did you drink the water?
You know, one time I did. I was a long, long hike by myself, and I got very hot. At the end of the day, I sat in the stream on a rock, watched papilio, mackay, and nectarine, and drank the water, and I was fine. But probably the luck of the draw, just as in the mountains here. When we arrived in Philippine, we were greeted by the staff of panda guides and scientists, a couple of scientists, several guides, and local folks from the nearby village. No one asked this person to adorn himself with the magnificent local... Now we knew what that was, do you? Clematis, of course, all the time. It's a clematis or clematis, wonderful species, and he did that off his own bat. Quite beautiful. And these are the people among whom we spent the next several days. I will show one group picture just so you can see everyone who was along. And I'll mention that two in the upper left were our guides. The taller one had the English name of Rolf. That was not his Chinese name. I do have his Chinese name, but it escapes me at the moment. But he was a true woodsman, a true tracker, absolutely superb, and actually quite a good biologist as well, and his English was excellent. We spent a lot of time with him, and he was extremely caring. The rule there is that no one was off on his or her own. That lasted a day and a half. When he found out the kind of group he had, that we were pretty experienced in the woods, most of us, and we were pretty headstrong, and finally we got permission to roam on our own if we were very, very careful. I don't think very many of us took advantage of that. Jan did, Mary did, and Tia did. And had some stunning days in the Chinese wilderness.
Hey, look, you hugged the place too.
Beg your pardon?
Nothing.
What'd you say? Oh, come on. Is it so hard to recognize now? So the main object here for most visitors is this bad boy, not this particular panda. The access is very limited. Only 50 people or so are allowed into this preserve in an entire year. And access is not guaranteed by any means to a panda. They're not captive. They are radio collared, but the radio collars are not available for use by the guides. The guides have to track. Only the biologists may use the radio collars. So the trackers track them by the old-fashioned techniques. They determine whether a particular panda is sufficiently stable, not pregnant, not having young right there necessarily, and can be approached. And if they make that determination, they then call by cell phone to the other tracker down below, who then brings the small groups up. And it's hard work. It's uphill without trails through the bamboo, and it's very hot. So it was work. Some of the other people got some very clear shots of the panda eventually. This is one of Tia's shots. And he was eating, it was a male, and he was eating bamboo shoots as they are supposed to do. And I do have a little film clip of this and one other animal that if we have time at the end there, each of them is under a minute, so I suspect you might want to see them. They're great. They were taken by Aphie Oppler, so I'll show them to you later on. But the panda, as wonderful as it was to see a wild panda, and I have to say, I always feel honored to be in the presence of any animal or plant, but a species that I've never been able to encounter before, what an honor that is, even in captivity, but especially in the wild. And I wrote a poem a month after this, because immediately when I got home, I went to Australia for a number of writing and teaching jobs, and got to see wild koalas. And I suspect that it's very uncommon for someone to have the honor of seeing wild panda and wild koala in the same month. And platypus, but that was brief. Then there was this animal, which was actually, as much as we love the panda, this one was more of a surprise. Now, it's a poor picture. I took this picture from a photograph on the wall of our little dorm. The movie I have afterwards, although it's not as close up, is better. And Aphie actually does have some good photographs that I hope to incorporate at some point. Wasn't able to get them. But this, would you like to guess what our animal that might live in the Arboretum, I don't know, but it certainly lives in the wilder precincts around Seattle and is common in much of the Northwest. I don't use the same genus, but it certainly is very closely related. Anybody want to guess?
Raccoon.
Raccoon.
No. And this is not a red panda, by the way.
Squirrel.
Squirrel.
Yeah, squirrel. What sort of a squirrel?
It's a squirrel?
Pardon?
It's a Totoro.
A Totoro. I don't know a Totoro.
Okay.
Is that something I should know?
It's Japanese.
Ah. Flying squirrel. Who said that? Jan, well done. It's a flying squirrel. It's a true flying squirrel. It's not one of the so-called flying foxes that is a mammal with flaps. It's not a squirrel. It's not, obviously not the rat kind of flying fox. It's a true flying squirrel. And again, I'll show you the movie a little later. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't show it in flight. It shows it going up the tree, and you'll enjoy that. But this animal, with its Paul Newman blues, and its red back, and its dark tail, and its funny little ears that aren't really green, they just look orange, and its white face, is a meter long.
Oh my God.
And when it flies, and we saw it twice, not absolutely clearly because there was foliage, but we saw it go over here and then go up another tree and come back. It looks like a Volkswagen door flying through the forest. That's all I could think. There were, of course, some challenges to this kind of travel in this kind of forest. It's not a banana slug. It's a leech. And Jan's in. I think Jan's the only one of us really who got it. Not a great big deal, but it's dramatic. But there were great rewards as well, and this is Tia's photograph, and Tia's the only person who found this plant and who got to see it. And she tried to show everybody else, but it was on one of her solo walks. And it was the same day I was going up the stream one way and seeing these fabulous swallowtails. She was going up the other way. Found this, and then we met later on. And when we went down for the dinner at the, oh well, we'll talk about this later. Maybe it's just photograph, but does anyone want to guess what genus this is in?
Oh, so is it a straw?
No. You'll never guess the family. But if you take those corollas down a little bit, and then reflex the petals, the tips of the petals out a little more, keep the color about the same.
Fuchsia.
No, it looks kind of fuchsia-like. No. The flowers are symmetrical, not asymmetrical like in a pencil.
Orange?
It's in that family. You're in the right genus.
Okay.
But it's not
It's
like
like
well
mountain
done.
laurel.
Pardon?
It's like mountain laurel.
Well, now you're veering away again.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the mock orange genus and the mock orange family, obviously.
Syringa?
Yes.
Are you kidding?
Which makes it a
Lilac.
lilac. It's a wild lilac. And ancestral wild lilac. How thrilling.
Yeah.
Got a pretty excited girl in my hands here. And this was, I think, Tia's favorite flower. Everybody got to see these. Tia immediately recognized its affinities. It took a while for us to determine that. It's really quite different in some ways, but yet in other ways it absolutely resembles. Pardon?
Passiflora?
No, actually not. Think of a common plant here in Washington.
Rhododendron?
No, it's an herb, it's herbaceous. Pardon?
Trilling.
Yes, exactly. It's a trillium. But the number of flower parts has been multiplied.
The yellow spindly things are the petals.
Yeah, the yellow. skinny bits, these are the petals. Those are the petals. These are the anthers, that's the stigma. And I guess the purple bit is sort of the seed of the stigma. Ah, isn't it wonderful? So there were a lot of splendid plants, but I'm just those two I wanted to show you because they were Tia's photographs of her two favorites, I think.
Tell them the genus and species.
I don't, oh, yes, of course, thank you. Well, you tell us about it.
It's Paris polyphylla.
That's right. Paris is the genus, as in the city, and polyphylla, which means lots of leaves, as you can see. Paris polyphylla. Isn't that pretty? Now, when we got to Tibet, left Pho Ping, Panda Preserve, and did other things in between, including Kunming, and we had a very soft spot for Kunming. What a beautiful place that is, your home city. We went to the Tibetan part of Yunnan, and there was a very interesting sense of what colorful plants should look like. Walking through the streets of Shangri-La, I mean, going with that name and really trying to attract visitors, there really aren't very many people there. I mean, after large numbers of people, most places we've been, and then nobody in Pho Ping, to come there again, we're not very many people, but there were lots and lots of pretty lights along the street to walk by. And yet, there wasn't all that. There, too, we found extraordinary colors in the wild, and going up the, we took a small tram and then hiked farther up on Shiksa, that was its name, Shiksa Snow Mountain, on the very edge of the Himalaya, and looking down, and then also when we hiked around the lake in Pyle National Park, there were 8 species of blooming rhododendrons and azaleas, all rhododendrons. And this particular one, pretty one, happened to be invaded by another different species of blue coryllis with an even deeper blue. And there was another flower there with that very same blue, Tia. What was it? But we're really here not to talk about flowers and food and wonderful buildings, or even the people so much as to talk about butterflies. So now that my time is almost all gone, I'll begin the part about the subject that I'm here for. And I'm going to do this in probably a very dry way. It's not going to be my usual talk in which I go on forever about this story and that story, and I can't shut my trap because too many interesting stories have happened. And I don't know any stories about these things, so lucky you, all we're going to do is see these beautiful butterflies. Yes, John?
Well, that genus name is Lobacla, not Loblaca.
Thank you. Right away. Helen fixes me up and we'll catch that. Thank you very much.
You know, the only reason I caught it is it's the only Asian representative of the Thrivys group.
The only Asian representative of the Thrivys group. Terrific. Thank you, John. And now that you say that, I recall we could not collect. We had no collecting permit anywhere. So we didn't, of course. And but we did a great deal of catch and release. All the butterflies that were handled were released unharmed. And so don't worry about that. But you'll see a lot of the min tweezers as well as wild butterfly pictures. So we start with the butterfly closely related. Come on in, gentlemen. We're just starting the butterfly part of the butterfly talk. You missed all the extraneous. How are you doing? There's seats over here. Good timing. So when you think about our northern cloudy wing, here you see a Chinese relative of it. And so we're starting with the skippers, particularly the spread-wing skippers. And we find one of the most beautiful butterflies we saw the whole time, Barca bicolor. There's one whose scientific name we can remember easily. Extraordinary butterfly that, do you know its nearest relatives, John? I don't, might be.
Lothardini, New York.
Yeah, maybe very not, I don't know. But what a beauty, and it was a mud puddler. So we would find it commonly spreading its wings or not. And this is along the trail into Pho Ping where water's coming down over a sort of a phyllite or slate, and bunches and bunches and bunches of them. Aren't they exquisite? And they're big. This is life size. Yes. Well, that's my test, you know, to see if how many are asleep yet. But they are, at at least as big as our silver spotted skipper, and actually he's a little bit bigger than that. Good big butterfly. Now here we come to something we can easily recognize as far as its affinities go, dusky wing. But while the underside isn't that much more spotty than, say, a nice oak dusky wing or something, Capricious or something, you look at the upper side and it gets just pretty fancy butterfly. Poor picture of the male, but we have a good picture of the very ornamented female. That's stunning. And yet the forewings look, they could be proportions practically, couldn't they? They could be one
I
of
don't know, Nicholas.
except they don't have, exactly. They've got the bend on the, you know, our dreamy dusky wing has this little bend right here, that's distinctive. It also has a lot of the gray hairy skidding, and it doesn't have the glassy spots, just like this. So while that might have one glassy, I don't know if it's, might just be a white spot. But you're right, the forewings are a lot like Erinacyclus, the dreamy, is that dreamy or sleepy?
Dreamy.
Dreamy dusky wing, thank you. And, but the hind wings are really something else.
Is it dreamy or sleepy?
We gotta get these things right. Was it Scudder made up those names, so we gotta honor the old guys. I haven't put the common names in on very many of these because a lot of them probably don't have common names in English. But some of them do because they're shared with Great Britain and Europe, and often will have an English name. Some of them are even whole Arctic that we recognize from here. But this is one that occurs in Britain. It's the only Erinus, or dusky wing, that occurs in Britain. Tia and I well remember a butterfly walk, or a butterfly trip that we led as a benefit for the Xerces Society in 1985 in England. It's called Butterfly Watching in England. I think maybe it was Butterflies and Beers of England, I'm not sure. And it was a spring like this. And so thank goodness for the butterfly houses and the sunny day on the Isle of Wight. But we found ourselves crawling under a hedgerow at Monkswood Experimental Station trying to find this, and I remember Joan DeWin saying, I paid $3,000 to look for dingy skippers in the rain.
This one looked like it flew from Britain.
I know. It had been through the wars, I think. But it's a common species all across the whole Arctic and not very distantly related.
This looks like a Northwest picture because, you know, the rain.
Yeah. But we had a certain amount, but fortunately our time was pretty sunny much of the time. And I have to tell you, it was exquisite. I mean, when Tia and I had that picture of us in the blue corylus in the forest, we thought we were in heaven. I mean, we never wanted to go anywhere else ever. The temperature was perfect. There were no biting insects, and it was glorious. Everything about it was glorious. Plus, Tia had gotten well to take the trip, which was the best part. A handsome skipper. And I'm not going to try to tell you where each of these were. Many of them were in Faux Ping, some of them were in Yunnan, some of them were in both, and a few were in other places in between. John, anytime you want to speak about affinities of anything you see, just
Oh, it's an Erinus type thing.
Yeah.
And then,
feel free to pipe up. Now, this is closely related to one of ours, or at least in the same genus, but it's quite different looking. And yet you see the wing shape and the posture, the way it holds its wings, just the same as our so-called Arctic skipper, which isn't a particularly well-named butterfly in English because it doesn't really occur in the high Arctic. But you know the butterfly I'm talking about, Cardiorcephalus palemon, we call it the Arctic skipper. It's one of our prettiest skippers. I was very pleased the other day because I found the first one ever recorded in Columbia County in Oregon. But it's gold and silvery and brown and rich colors. This one, look at its beautiful white tipped antennae. And this was on the trail down into the Panther Preserve.
What does the Cartero part of the name mean? Cephalus means head, right?
Cephalus is head. Anybody know the Latin name root of Carter or Cartero?
Carter's head, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's Ray Stanford's big thing. He never had to figure out what Carter's head was.
Carter's head. We'll just call it Carter's head. Good question, though. I don't know what the root of Cartero is.
Christoph was a famous Russian naturalist and expedition.
Thank you.
Well, Carter would be a map, I would think, like the
Oh, good point.
cartography.
Yeah, good
It's
point.
a
That
study
could be
of
a root,
maps,
yeah.
so I suppose maybe it's at a map.
Well, in Spanish it means.
Might have a little built-in GPS, who knows?
A master.
It's got a beautiful white, if you see there, the palpier white, like our
Maybe that's it.
sooty wing, as well as the, but not, it's not that way in the whole genus, it's, not all of them have the white. Nectarian and nice little mustard there. And then we move from the spreadwing skippers into, of which we did not have very many species, into the Hesperine or grass or airplane skippers, whatever you want to call them. You know, the ones, the previous group of skippers feed on, I call them dicot skippers because they all feed on dicotyledonous plants as larvae, and this next group feeds on monocotyledonous plants, grasses, palms, bamboo, and so on. And many of them hold their wings in this characteristic fashion, as you know. Forewings and hindwings at different angles. So this is not distantly related, probably, from some of ours, but kind of puts you in mind of a super spotted dun skipper. But again, a number of these we're not completely certain about the species yet. I made a lot of these determinations, Paul made a lot of them, and we're talking about a lot of them. That's the ventrum of that one. I found another spread wing, but I wasn't equipped to photograph it, that was in the genus Polites, related to our Sonora and Mardon skippers. Quite a pretty thing. Andy Warren, our great friend and mentor down in Florida, manager of the collections at the McGuire Center that John's written so well about, and where John is a curatorial associate and has worked recently on the Bolorias, such as we saw in the introductory talk. Andy thinks that this one is probably in one of those genera. But when even Andy's not sure, it means we have our work cut out for us.
You can't see the hind wing.
No, right, and that's a problem with photographs. Can't go back and turn the picture over. Now, this is a big mystery. This was one of the most beautiful butterflies. I thought, we all thought we were the first to find it, but it was all the same afternoon when we split up. So we were probably all the first to find it. But they were fairly abundant below the panda preserve along the stream, and they mud puddled and they nectared. They nectared on a plant related to Russian olive, a native plant related to Russian olives. It was extremely fragrant and a superb nectar plant for swallowtails and others. And oh, just loaded the air with scent. And then nectared on this and various other things. But all black, coal black, and even blacker veins. Of course, there are some semi-iridescent scales between the veins, so they look lighter. So the veins look even darker. But it's just a coal black butterfly, anthracite skipper. And it's not in Chihuahua. And it's not anywhere we found in the web or anywhere else. And it's got to be known because it's just a stunning.
Is that the same one?
Well, I think so. I'm not
Look, it's got the red wing shape. The other one had elongated.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Then I thought maybe it was just foreshortening. If it's not the same one, then we have a whole different mystery. And oh, shoot, I was going to ask you again. So finally we come to the one Parnassus of the trip. And this is a joke on me because we kept seeing, there's a genus of whites in the old world called Aporia. The best known to Westerners is Aporia curtegi, which used to occur in Britain but became extinct in the 19th century, called the bath white. But it looks like this, it's white with black veins. And it's not uncommon in parts of Europe, and then there are more and more species of Aporias, and they're whites in the white family as you go farther east into Asia. And there are about 5 different things we found. Every time we found them, I thought it was a new species of Aporia, and Paul did too. And even this, believe it or not, we did not instantly recognize it as a Parnassian because it's so much like some of the Aporias. And then Paul got to looking at the action. You're shaking your head, yes, can you understand that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I felt like a real fool later, and then it's finally, and then Tia saw one in flight. This is coming down from the Flying Squirrel Volkswagen door place. And we're in a trail intersection, these were flying all around. Tia said, that's a Parnassian, isn't it? You said that on the wing from its flight. I said, well, it sure looks like it, but it's got to be another Aporia, because I was convinced all these things were Aporias. And Paul finally said, you know, I really think it is a Parnassian. And we never got a female with a spragus, which would have kicked it off right away. The chastity belts that mated females have on the back of their abdomens. But finally, we were looking at the veins of the wings and this, that, and the other, and we finally said, oh yeah, It is, and I felt stupid, but we all made the mistake at first. And we finally determined it's Parnassus glacialis, which is the lowest elevation Parnassian in that area. And
This was in association with that Crudalis?
it was certainly in the same area where the Crudalis was common. And there is no other fumariaceous plants that we found. So it's almost certainly that blue Crudalis is probably the food plant. Our species, you know, the Clodius parnassian, as a caterpillar, our lowland species feeds on wild bleeding heart, which is in the same bleeding heart family as Crudalis. In fact, it may well feed on our pink Crudalis as well. But we don't know that for sure, probably. So we did have this one, and it has no red. This is one of several species, Mnemosyne, which means memory, and a few others that have partially transparent wings, the black and the white, but no red at all. Now notice the yellow on the body though, because this becomes important later on in the story. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's some cool Aporia. And even when we got home, I thought we had maybe 5 species of Aporias. You're gonna laugh when you hear the outcome. Stunning butterfly, eh? Most of the Asian Parnassians occur in the high country. I was able to visit my old mentor from New Guinea when I was in Australia on a trip after this, and he sent me home with a box of Parnassians, all legal, that he had acquired in trade for some New Guinea butterflies quite a while back. And it's a stunning set of many of the Asian Parnassians. They're going to go to the McGuire Center, and they all have red of different kinds, except for Mnemosyne. All the others have brilliant cherry red spots, as our mountain Parnassian and Clodius Parnassians do. But a male, you see, if we had only had a female with asparagus, we wouldn't have known like that. And then we move in that, and of course the Parnassians, those of you who don't know, those Parnassians are swallowtails. They're in the swallowtail family. The venation of the wing and certain other characters points that out. They're probably a very primitive branch of the Pilionidae family. So we move from them into the typical swallowtails, and this is the most typical of all swallowtails in the sense that it was the first swallowtail ever named by Linnaeus, the great Swedish botanist and zoologist, who gave us the binomial system of nomenclature of the genus and the species. And because those early scientists had classical educations and didn't know very much about the animals they were naming, and they had so many to name, they commonly applied names from mythology or literature, and that's why our dusky-winged skippers are named for Greek poets, Perseus and Propertius and things like that. And all of the swallowtails that were named by Linnaeus were named for participants in the Trojan Wars. So Machaon is one of those, and he was probably slaughtered by Paris or somebody, and so he had bloody spots, and that's probably why he did that, because most of the swallowtails have red spots. Anyway, so this is Papilio machaon, the old world swallowtail, which is perceived as being the same species as our Oregon swallowtail. And that's the only one that we identified for certain. I caught that at Napa Lake in the Tibetan part of Yunnan. It's quite different from the old world swallowtail in Britain, in which the red patch is much bigger and it's kind of a beautiful iridescent coral color. And quite different from the Alaskan subspecies.
It's not so different from Oregonian.
Exactly. It looks much more like Oregonians than it does like Machaon alaskiensis or Machaon britannicus. You're absolutely right. And there were lots of these big, beautiful black and red and blue swallowtails, and we didn't get any decent pictures of them. They were very, I don't even know who took this picture, but Asa, I think, because most of Asas are pretty grainy, I'm not sure why. But they were very difficult to photograph. They didn't come down very much, and when they did, they didn't spread. But this butterfly above, if you could see a good picture of it, is an absolutely stunning iridescent blue thing. And we didn't see a number of them. I think I saw Papilio maci too, which looks like it, but we're not certain about it. These, on the other hand, are a little more common. I think this would be difficult, but there's a whole suite of Asian swallowtails that look about like that. And we have not yet...
Oh, is that African or?
It might be. I didn't have these pictures at my disposal when I was working with Pyle, and Paul hasn't put a name on them. So I don't know what they are.
They're poisonous.
I have to look at them. Well, yes, many butterflies have
are poisonous from chemicals they take on from the plants that the caterpillars eat. Guano is the most famous example, of course. And they advertise their distastefulness to the predators with bright colors, very often on the body or near the body, on the tail, so that if a bird ever does eat one, it will become promptly educated and never touch another, and teach its young that as well. And that's called aposematism, and there are many examples. And keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that at the very end. A long proboscis, eh? Second at the butt.
Now, there were a number of these, this subgenus of the kite swallowtails, is not too distantly related from our zebra swallowtail in the east, although not that close. And we're not quite certain of the species that we have photographed yet. And quite delicate and lovely. Fast flying.
I've got a question here.
Yes. Please.
What, there's a young lady
Oh,
right in
yes,
front of you.
yes.
I know a butterfly that looks a lot like the zebra butterfly. It looks a lot like that.
Where did you see it?
I've seen it in a picture from a calendar at my class.
Oh, good.
Probably a really zebra.
It could be a real zebra swallowtail. They live in the eastern part of the U.S. and the caterpillars feed on a plant called pawpaw. And they look a lot like this, but their tails are even longer and their red is even redder. That may be what you saw. The things that we have that are roughly this color are the pale tiger swallowtails, but they have much broader bands on the wings. Good for you. What's your name?
Rivka?
Rivka, what a pretty name. Thank you for your question. And then there's this thing, boy. You know, I kept seeing it backwards. I kept thinking it was, I totally turned the butterfly's orientation around and I didn't see the rear end at all. And I thought the head was down here and this was, anyway, it's another one of those. And Paul has called this one Mandarina, so I assume he feels that he has a reason for doing that. It's in the same group. Now we come to the Pieridae. We've done the skippers and the swallowtails. Now we come to the whites, sulfurs, and marbles, and orange tips, the Pieridae. And we finally do come to a real Aporia. And you see, it's something like the Parnassian, not that much. But we still haven't settled on exactly what species it is. That's the male dorsum and the male ventrum. See some yellow near it. This becomes important. There's the female. And these were male. And these were abundant in Patachua, it actually should be Patachua, not Putachua, National Park in, again, the Tibetan portion of Yunnan. It's a beautiful national park with a trail all around the lake and another lake that's longer, and you can walk around that if you have the time, but we took a beautiful little boat up the lake and then walked the rest of it. There were some neat striped squirrels there, and some wonderful flowers and a lot of wild rhododendrons, and yaks. The national park is fairly heavily grazed by yaks. But many of the plants have been grazed by yaks for donkey's years, so they are fairly, so to speak, so they're fairly well adapted, I imagine.
Yaks are native, right?
I beg your pardon?
Yaks are native?
Well,
They gotta be native somewhere, wonder.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But they're under domestication now, so. They're really good to eat if you're not a vegetarian. We went into one Tibetan family's home outside of this area that they call Shangri-La, and were served young yak from these big iron stoves in each corner of the room. Each one had a spit with a part of a small yak on it. And lots of other things, including yak butter tea, which you read about, which wasn't as bad as I thought. And something that came in a little stone crock that was lethal. Very different fruit from everywhere else. So anyway, the joke is that of all the things that I thought were 5 species of Aporias, in the end, we only had one Aporia. This one, which looks a lot like the main Aporia in Eurasia. And as we go along, you'll see other species in whole different families that I thought were Aporias as well.
Yeah, that's a different, I think that's a different one from the first one.
I really don't. It's in the very same place and the same population and they're all together and they were quite variable.
Well, they can have suites of 5 or 10 in the same place.
I mean, you could be right, you know, it could be. It could be. It could be. You know how the yellow varies on a lot of our PRs,
Yeah.
aren't you know? This was really something. This illustrates as much as anything the huge difference between different parts of China based upon the very, very large human population that exerts a lot of pressure, and they manage that unbelievably well in many cases, and things work extraordinarily well with a great many people in many, many cases. I don't know what they're going to do about the air in the long run. And thank you so much for coming. Please thank her for coming in for her good question. Thanks for coming. So when we went to Shanghai, Shanghai is even bigger than Beijing, and it's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming place. But when we left it and went down to the little water villages, we saw more and more and more and more butterflies. And these water villages are maybe 20 miles south of the outer rim of Shanghai, which is probably 20 miles from the center of Shanghai. And you know, lots and lots and lots of high-rises that are being built at a rate much faster than the succession of trees on the northwest clear cut. I mean, fertilized. I mean, they go really, really fast, these high-rises being built, large, large numbers. But once you get outside that, the countryside reasserts itself. And as we got down toward the water villages, there were hundreds and then thousands of butterflies all around the glass and all over every flower. And every single one was PRS wrapping. With the exception of one painted lady that we saw on the, and you know this genus of flowers, of course. Right? Sheridan? Somebody? Yeah, gaillardias. They're gaillardias. Same genus we have the Indian blanket flowers. And they were all over them. They were all over all the yellow composites and everything else. But they were all, every single butterfly we saw, cabbage, or maybe some of the closely related PRs, except for one or two painted ladies. So huge abundance and very low diversity, which is what one finds according to a formula that Paul Ehrlich developed a long time ago that has to do with rising human population and reducing natural diversity. But they were beautiful. I always like a cabbage. I saw 2 cabbage whites today and it gladdened my heart.
If you live here, you gotta love them.
Yeah, exactly. Now this one looks a lot like a cabbage, but Paul did determine, and I felt that I determined at the time too, what we had, that there is a species called PRS canidia that's quite closely related, but I'm not sure if this is it. We still have more work to do with our array of PRs, and this is of course where we really wish, with all apologies, that we had a specimen tray of series. It's very difficult to do from the photographs. This, on the other hand, looks like a cabbage, but you notice the spots are much bigger, and the butterfly is much bigger. It's twice the size of a cabbage white. And in England, the cabbage whites are called small whites, and this species is called the large white. And they're not even that closely related. This one has become established in Brazil, by the way, whereas you can imagine it's a pretty heavy competitor with, Tia, that's not the plant that,
I'm sorry?
that's not the plant that David's friend brought us yesterday, is it?
No.
The herb bouquet.
This is a
So these are these nice big large whites, and there were lots of them up at full
It is oval position.
Correct. Thank you. It's ovipositing there on this crucifer. Yeah, so laying an egg. There's the female.
You see that abdomen there?
Yeah, does anyone know what she's doing there, what she's saying?
No.
No! You might think she was saying yes, but she's not to potential males. That's the classic no to oncoming males who might be interested. She's not. She plays that like putting her abdomen in the air, which seems counterintuitive, but there you are. And the amount of black scaling varies a great deal, especially in spring, as it does with our spring whites. I don't mean the spring white, but it could be that one too. The spring margin whites and so on. And then we get into the nappy group, and we feel that we had 2 different species of the
But of course, this is a very difficult group, and this may undergo revision before we publish, and we may have questions, but this one, we felt was the actual PRS nappy, the mustard white, which ours used to be referred to. And of course, if you saw this in the Northwest wood in the spring, you wouldn't be surprised, you'd just think it was a well-marked.
I'd die.
Well, you're more discriminating. And there's the male of an actual nappy if it is.
Do you have the other one?
Yes. And this one is the one that's called in Britain the green veined white. And that'd be a very classic green veined white in England. And then this is the other one called Meliti. These were at the Longleaf Forest Park, which is not very far from Kunming. It was quite a productive place for us as well. A big public county park, where we found several species that we did not see elsewhere. Do you know a place called Longleaf?
Yes.
Longleaf? It's a beautiful park. And there's the male. Beautiful purple species of oxalis. We saw several different oxalises. Now these are cool whites. There's a species in England that you'll see an axis has been split into two now, and the difference between them, the primary difference between them is the length of the phallus. And they are called the wood whites, and one of them occurs solely in Northern Ireland, and the other one is in England as well. But in Eurasia, there are the same genus, but some different species. So this one was named from the Amur region, or the Amur Mountains, and it's called Leptidia amurensis, the Amur wood white. But notice the very interesting shape of the wing. And of course, the wingtips have been nipped, so looks like they were damaged actually in eclosure, developmental. So you can't really get the full shape of them. But you can see how they come out to kind of a point. Very interesting, elongated wings.
It's trying to sting you.
Yeah, looks like it. And then, on our trip out from Foping, hiking back up the trail, so sad to leave that place, I never wanted to go. We found a different species of Leptidia wood white. I found this one. It was much bigger. It was twice the size of the other. It's almost as big as the large white. It's almost 2 inches in wingspan, and had very heavily marked veins, and this was an easy one to identify in Chukio, called serrated, the serrated wood white. And there you can see that nice pointed wings to the tips to the wings. Found that among Aza's pictures, and I don't think Paul has maybe discerned that one yet, but it looks like a species of Appius. And there is
Well,
one
wing
that-
shape, yeah.
Yeah. And this thing, I don't know what the heck that's supposed to be. In one of Aza's pictures that came through to me, and I said, what's that? It looks like a butterfly there, doesn't it? A white and a
Toadstool.
toadstool. Might be a toadstool. We're not gonna.
I think actually there's a frog in there.
Yeah,
I think it's a leaf.
You think that's a leaf with a frog under it?
Yeah, I do. Sure.
Oh, there's a frog.
Okay, we can eliminate that one. No. You know, people wonder if butterflies could get along when they've been damaged. You know, they say if you rub a few scales off their wings, will they be able to fly? Because of course it's received mother lore that you don't rub scales off the wings because they can't fly. Well, that's just good advice about going gently in nature that all mothers pass on. But it's a little exaggerated, as you know, because they lose scales a lot. And in fact, obviously they can lose a lot more than a few scales and still keep functioning, as this one was. It's not the brimstone, which is a species in Europe, but it's a species of brimstone in the genus Gonitrix. I see. Bahaguru. That's the male, it's yellow, and that's the female. And these were common at a lake that we walked the shore of, very near the actual Tibetan border, Napa Lake, at a pretty high elevation. I think it was about, wasn't that lake at about 5,000 meters? No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that at all. I meant 3,000. Yeah, 3,000. It's about 9,000 feet. Although we did go up over, we went up to 5,000 meters on Chickasaw Snow Mountain. Yeah, we did. Yeah, that was over 5,000 on top. Oh, I don't think so. Well, check it out. I might be exaggerating. Found this as soon as we got into the high country of the Shinling Mountains, which are a wonderful long range of mountains. One of the major redoubts of the Panda. Looks a lot like kind of like our orange sulfurs, but almost as burnt orange as the Meads sulfur of the Rocky Mountains. Beautiful pink antennae males. Big silver spot. Female. Fenestrated, in John's good word. Windows in the black margins. And actually, as Tia said, I mean, it's almost a little like Christina with the big orange patches.
Yeah, if you saw something like this in eastern Washington, it'd just be an alfalfa bug running.
The deeper orange. And then there was, as we had an orange common sulfur, and we have a yellow common sulfur that we call the clouded sulfur, and there is one there too, Colis irate. There's the female. And these were in fairly disturbed areas in the bigger clearings in the Panda preserves. And then we actually did have orange tips. The Tibetan subspecies of the Eurasian orange tip. A beautiful thing, great, big. I think that one was actually missing this left forewing. It had had an encounter with a bird before we found it, is my guess. And that's why you see the right forewing so well displayed. And it's actually flying somewhat, not very well. There's another one. Unless it was really folded down, maybe it's... So we leave the whites and sulfurs and come to the lycinids or the gossamer wings, starting with the, we only had one copper, and that was when we come into hair streaks.
It's just a hair streak.
Or blue. You know, the words hair streak and blue lose meaning, as Nabokov taught us in the neotropics and probably other areas as
Well,
well.
Indo-Australian area.
Yeah,
This is native,
yeah.
so I leaked it.
You think it's migrated?
I'm thinking it is.
Oh, wow, that hadn't even occurred to me. It looks like it, doesn't it? The Miletids are this weird little, or Miletine, weird little subfamily of the lycinids, unless you want to call them a family, that include the harvester butterfly in North America, the Halloween-colored beauty of the East, whose larvae feed on woolly aphids on alders. They're carnivorous. Might be a Miletine, John. But the upper side was stunning. I mean, it looks kind of brown with a little purple there. That's the best anybody got. But when the sun was on, this is a very small butterfly too. And when the sun was on that, it was the most brilliant blue-purple I mean, more than a Colorado hair streak, even deeper. Just extraordinary.
An elephant.
David, I want a determination on that. You're our elf in that.
Look, we both did well enough to call it an elephant.
No kidding. But I mean, if you saw that in Washington, you'd say it's always just a really worn moss elephant or something like that. We don't know what it is. I'll tell you one thing though, it was blue on top.
Yeah, it's in the moss.
Yeah, moss, it's in the moss. It was blue on top. I don't know if we'll be able to determine that or not. This one, on the other hand, we saw quite a few. And if you saw this out on the Salal here, you'd say, oh, nice beautiful brown elephant, right? But in fact, it's not even in the genus Calafris. Although I'll bet Albergia is very close to Calafris.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, they're all cloth.
Sure, in the broad sense. Tia found this nectaring on that beautiful yellow plant at Napa Lake. And this one too is blue on top. Now this one drove me absolutely nuts going through Chu-Io. The top of it actually looks very much like the representations of a butterfly called Scolatanthides orion, which is a genus we used to put our arrowhead blue in. So it might not be that distantly related, do you think, John, from the silver blues and so on?
Well,
Scolatanthides.
yeah, I don't know what that thing is.
Yeah, but, well, I mean, that genus Scolatanthides. The upper side looks like that, but the underside isn't remotely like it. It's not like anything in Chu-Io except this algae.
Yeah, it's another Miletine.
Maybe. It's not in Chu-Io anyway. Then we got into spring azures, and boy, we're not gonna be able to make any specific determinations, probably. There's a bunch of them, and they're difficult. But this is, we know we had at least 2 species, and this is up at higher elevations in the Panda Preserve, and it looks a lot like our echo blue. So out here, you wouldn't think twice, probably. And it's small, it's ordinary size for an echo azure or a spring azure in the east. And then we went down to Long Lee, much lower elevation, and there was a really big spring azure. This one's life-size. See, half of you are asleep now. We're glad I'm coming very close to the nymphalas now, and that's the end. But they were really big. I mean, they were nearly an inch, some of them. And the females were like this, very pale, and the males were a stunning blue. So we didn't get a picture of the male, but I don't think we're going to be able to put names on those. But clearly, there's a very interesting array of celestrinas in Asia. That's like saying there are a lot of chickens in Key West. Which there are, by the way. At the end of the butterfly big year, you know, for my book Mariposa Road, the last 2 places I went, for any of you who might have read it, or perhaps will, were Kauai and Key West. I'm sure I'm the only person who butterflied in Kauai and Key West in that the last week of 2008.
Oh, God.
Oh, no, you think there are more? Okay. But the one thing that Kauai and Key West have in common, the chickens. Millions of feral chickens in both places. So this one, however, we were able to identify, and it was really neat. It was in a cultural site, not a very wild site, and this yellow oxalis was growing all over. And is that the egg? I think that might be the egg right there. Yeah, it might be. And then up in the, there was a big flat meadow in the Panda Preserve where the golden pheasants lek in the fall.
Oh,
Does anyone know the golden pheasant? Has to be one of the most exquisite birds in the world. We normally see them in zoos or aviaries. They were collected by the pheasant collectors and so on. And only 2 of us on the trip saw it, and that was Jan and me, because we opted out of the second big day's trek up to the pandas. I had pretty darn good looks at the pandas. But Tia hadn't, so she went the second day and had much more time with the pandas. But Jan and I asked Rolf where we might have a chance at the golden pheasant. And he said off in this big area of bamboo, that's as good as any. So find a good place and stake it out. And we found a deep bamboo patch and we staked it out for hours. Finally started hearing gallinaceous bird clucks and watched and watched. Finally a female came along, and then all of a sudden, for just seconds, this resplendent golden pheasant walked out of it. So we did see it. But in the fall, you come to this meadow and the males are out there lecking by the dozen, which is extraordinary. Lecking being a male portrait display. Anyway, Paul found this little pseudo-zizeria there, common in a disturbed area. And this one is another one that really blew our minds that there was nothing like it in Chuquillo at all. And the big monograph Chinese butterflies. Paul's just calling it pseudophilodis as a made-up name to because we don't have any idea what it is. And they were very common at Napa Lake. And
Do you see an association with a plant? Because, you know, that group really associates with the food plant.
Well, you know that Paul's extremely astute at that, and I never saw anything except nectaring. I didn't pick up any possible food plant associations. Maybe Paul did that I haven't heard yet.
Well, they might like nectar on their food plant.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Euphalotic.
Exactly. I mean, it looks like you.
That might be a pseudophalotic, actually.
I mean, it could be. It could be. There's a female.
Yeah, that's not a stretch for Western U.S.
I know, but why isn't it in the book? You know, it's common.
Why?
Common only in one place, though, and it was practically in Tibet. So it may be an area that just hadn't been worked very much when that monograph was done.
Drew was probably like what Holland was, you know, to Pyle comparatively.
Oh, well, no, it's far beyond that, I think.
I don't think so.
It's certainly not complete. I will say one thing about Professor Chu, who established this magnificent institute. He had an earlier institute, and he was re-educated in the Cultural Revolution and sent to the fields in his 70s. But he was able to be rehabilitated and come back and start a second whole institute. And it's a superb institute now. And he had a few years there before he died and set up a good staff and collection. So that's an extraordinary human story of endurance and adaptation. So here's another one of my aporias. I'm absolutely sure this was an aporia. And this species was around the research station, coming to ash pits, among other places. And what does it turn out to be? Paul figured this one out. It turns out to be a nymphalid, a brush-footed butterfly, that looks like the aporia, that looks like the Parnassus, has yellow on the body, and shares the same name with Jonathan's butterfly, because you might not all know that Gerardo Lamas, one of the greatest of the Western Hemisphere lepidopterists, recently named a Chinese butterfly in honor of Jonathan Pyle. And it is Aeneas Buddha Hellemai.
You know why they got the Buddha part of it?
I've been waiting to do that for a long time. And we're very, very proud of you. Very,
I didn't do a thing, you know.
well, we're proud of you sitting there Buddha-like, if nothing
Up
else.
there.
There's the email.
Yeah.
And again, notice all the yellow vestiture, yellow-orange vestiture along the abdomen, or the thorax in this case. No, can I be blamed for thinking this was another aporia? I mean, it really looks like it. Then we get back and start finding out what we actually had, and we only had the one aporia.
You know, that is the only genus, the only member of a subfamily of nymphalid butterflies.
Oh, yes. This is
Calanagini.
the what?
Calanagini.
Calanagini. The Calanagini subfamily is monotypic.
Right.
A single species in a single species?
No, single genus.
Single genus in the subfamily of brushfoots. And clearly, well, I'm not going to tell you clearly what yet. Just keep that picture in mind, okay? I'm coming down to the end now, and I'm going to show you something that I think we actually discovered for ourselves. I'm sure others knew it before, but very, very exciting. Glossiana gong, which looks like what? What are you saying all about? That it says Glossiana instead of Oloria?
Well, I said gong.
Oh, gong. And what does it look like that you've seen earlier this evening? It looks a lot like Dave's. And Dave, thank you for that beautiful presentation. They always are superb what you do for us. And those pictures of the ventrums of those two frillaries were so stunning. But this, if you found this down by Raymond in the Christmas tree plantations in the Midwest, Western Meadow frillary.
Until you turn it over.
Until you turn it over. Look at that. And there it looks a little bit like Selene, the silver bordered. They are silvery. The only Beloria, Glossiana Beloria, that are different, really probably subgenera of the lesser fritillaries. And the only one that we have that has silvery on it is the silver bordered bog frillary, which is Selene over in a few marshes on the east side of the state. But this one has silvery on it, and it has elements that look kind of like Selene, and has elements that look a little bit like Eunomia, one of the Arctic species.
Alaskansis.
And of course, you have just curated this group at
Yeah.
McGuire. Did you come across this species?
Oh, hundreds of them.
Oh, okay, good.
They're amazing.
Yeah, okay, cool. And this was very exciting to see. I wanted to see this all my life. You've probably seen them in evolution textbooks or biology textbooks or museums and exhibits. Is there anyone here who's never heard of the deadleaf butterfly? You've seen pictures of them, haven't you?
I've got one in my collection.
You have one? All right, I had one in my collection when I was, how old are you? I knew that. When I was 11, I had one too, so you got one even before me.
Well, you should, this is really important because this is a predatory butterfly and it sits and waits for unsuspecting creatures to fly by and then it snaps them.
And as you can see, it's putting its,
Are you buying this?
as you see, it's putting its, this is actually a carcass of a field mouse. And it has sucked out its vital fluids. Wawa miseducation.
That was so ridiculous.
But is that not the most extraordinary? Whatever your creation myth is, whether it's Judeo-Christian, or whether it's Darwinian, or whether it's Ojibwe and you think it's turtles all the way down, it doesn't matter how you perceive the creation, but you take a look at that leaf with the, it's not just the patterning. This is a fake mid-vein across the distal veins. There's your stem, there's your disease spots. And it hunkers up so you don't see the head. It's just extraordinary.
Some of them even have caterpillar eat marks on them.
That's right. So this is even fancier than our Polygonias, or anglewings, or comets as a leaf mimic. Probably the best in the world. But it's not only one of the best camouflage butterflies in the world, or a mimic of a dead leaf, but it is also one of the best examples of the second line of defense, which is called startle coloration. So if a bird should come along and kind of peck a little too close, or maybe kind of figure the gig out or something, then all of a sudden it'll flash its wings, and the bird goes, whoa, and the butterfly's out of there. So that's classic startle coloration. These things were all figured out by Darwin and Wallace and Beebe and the others a long time ago, but it took people like Lincoln Brower and that research group in Leiden and others to actually show experimentally that this stuff really works. Yes, Jim?
This actually worked at the McGuire Center in their rainforest.
Oh, yeah?
This way, yeah. They had a number of these, perched, of course, along the railings and stuff. You've been to the, and people would come along to them, not even realizing that they were there, hands running on the railing. And they, of course, didn't see them until they opened their wings, and that startled them. Actually caused people to,
by the way, the Lepidoptera Society meeting that many of you enjoyed in Leavenworth 2 years ago is going to be held this year in Denver, where I'm giving my 12-minute version of this hall. But it will be.
Dude, that's magic.
It might be like my butterfly faces. I'll just have some music and go bam, bam, bam. But next year, in 2013, it's going to be held at the McGuire Center. So this magic place you hear John talking about all the time, I planned it ahead. Get some frequent flyer miles, hop on a really long Amtrak trip or something, and go to Gainesville and see this wonderful place. You can see the collections. You can see the butterfly forest, which is one of the best anywhere. You can see these. And what I have to tell you is that we did not see this in the wild. We saw it in Butterfly Garden, that wonderful one at the place where the Entomological Institute is. But it does occur locally. It's great big habitat. It's just like outside the mesh. So we're certainly going to talk about it in our paper, but we will indicate that it was not in the wild. Also in that same butterfly garden, and closely related, was the red lacery. The actual color red is a rare thing in butterflies. There aren't that many species that have really actual bright red. Red Admiral does, and Red Admirable, and a few others. But this is one that does, and this is actually not as red as some of the species in Africa.
That's a helicony.
That's right, you're right. That should be at the beginning of this section too.
Oh, well, doesn't make any difference.
No,
It
you're
doesn't
right.
look like.
That's right. These are related to fritillaries and longwings.
That looks more like a helicony.
Yeah, he does. That's an awfully nice picture that I think that's yours, isn't it, Tia? And that's what the butterfly garden was like. It was huge and really outdoors with just mesh and lots of nectar, and there were lots of butterflies. And this was not in captivity. This was such a thrill to see because I had one of these in my collection when I was just a little older than you too. It's called the Blue Admiral, commonly. And what are you going to make that? Are you going to make it an anglewing or a tortoise shell? And yet the stripes on it are like an emerald. It's actually a genus called Caniska that's very close probably to Inicus, the peacock butterfly, which is very close to Nymphalis, I imagine.
That's where they all are now.
And Aglaeus, I think. And so they all probably should be in that larger genus of Nymphalis.
Aglaeus and Nymphalis.
So this is, and this would be Nymphalis probably. So this is related to our mourning cloak, which of course has blue and has stripes. You can see that. But how exciting, oh boy, I was just, this was coming down through that blue coryllis forest, and acres of it, and then to the beautiful waterfall, and then this turns up. Oh, I'm in heaven. It really was some of the very best days of my entire life in folk painting. And this is, I found the only one of these on the trip, which is funny because it's a common butterfly in Great Britain and across much of Eurasia. But I found the only individual, nobody else saw it except, no, that's right, I brought it back to the lunch place so everybody could photograph it and then released it. It's called the small tortoise, well, you can see that. And what does the scientific name refer to? Nettles, yeah, urticane. And it feeds on nettles, as does our Milbert's tortoiseshell. In fact, this is so close to the Milberts that James Scott once tried to lump them, but that didn't go very far.
It's actually Miller.
Is it Miller? I thought it was Jim. But they look quite different. The hind wing of this looks a lot like the hind wing of the, but it doesn't have the yellow stripes next to the orange. Beautiful butterfly though. And I was really pleased with it. It was at the Forest Park and it was down and it was a bit cloudy and I was up on a high area with kind of a heath and there were beautiful little shrines scattered here and there. And I was up by one of those and they're very hard butterflies to net unless they're nectar. Got it. But the next really cool thing, right after that I did not get, and that was the silver-washed fritillary, Spirea, or Argenus paphia. The only big fritillary we saw in the whole trip, and only I saw it, and it was on a water lily. Oh, it was so gorgeous, but I didn't, and then some people came along and they were singing, and people really enjoy their parks in China immensely. You see a lot of exercise and a lot of singing and a lot of play, and some quiet meditation and some natural history. Anyway, they didn't catch it. But there were, we actually found 2 species of anglewings. C. aureum, which is golden, it's a very golden anglewing, and Polygonia C. album. Now on our Compton tortoiseshell, what do we call it now? Is it back to Val album?
No, L album.
L album. Anyway, album means a marking, and so this has a C-shaped comma, and this is one really called the comma in Britain. There's one in the eastern U.S. called the comma as well. And our species are called this comma or that comma or this angle or that angle. And the lady, of course, is there. I had to laugh. Someone sent me a note the other day and said, my friend has found a Eurasian painted lady. It's not an American painted lady, and this is in Ontario. And I said, how would they know? You know, and this butterfly is called the cosmopolitan butterfly, and they look essentially the same all over the world. There are other species of painted ladies, as we know, but these all look about the same. We saw a few of these, too many. Of course, this year they've had a massive movement in the east. And you all know, don't you, that this year has seen the largest influx in the northeastern states and the upper Midwest of summer northward immigrants from the south that's ever been recorded. Millions of red admirals and lots of others. And monarchs much earlier than ever, and in Ontario, in one day, in one park, they had 19 species. 6 of them were new records for the area, and I think 9 of them were a month earlier than any previous record. So really weird butterfly movement things happening back there. Having to do, of course, with a very, very moderate spring throughout the east and probably climate change.
No.
So in a few cases we found evidences of the butterflies without finding the whole thing. Well, that Bernardus should not be capitalized. I'm spotting a few typos in my first article. But upperside and underside and upper side of the male. And these Charaxes are butterflies that are really powerful nymphalas, brushfoots, with great big strong bodies, and they're very well represented in Africa. But just a very small number of species in Eurasia and the Australasian region.
This one flew so fast I lost the wing.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. And there's an Arcturae larva, one of the nymphalines that we might or might not be able to pin down by, or Arcturae might be able to pin down by emperor types. There's a different group known as emperors that, I don't know how far we'll get with those, but they are butterflies. And we know there's subfamilies. Isn't that something? And this is not Araschia lavinia, which is very common all over much of Europe and occasionally turns up in Britain. This is Burjana, which is clearly an Asian name. And if you think that underside of the western meadow fritillary has pretty purple and colors on it, which it does, check this.
That's fake.
And you know, the entire trip, we encountered them only once, just a few individuals in one little wetland, tiny little wetland, next to that concrete trail, hiking back up out of full pink. Paul found some and I found some, that's the only place we found in the whole trip. There were a lot of Neptus down there. These are these little admirals. Not admirals, admirals. Not too distantly related from our Lurkins admiral. There were lots of them at full ping, and frankly I thought there were at least 2 species just based on size. But the only one that Paul has felt comfortable in putting a name on is this Philoroides. Oides meaning like something else.
Phyllis.
Like Phyllis. It's browner, that might be male or female, I don't know. And then another admiral relative in the pretty curious Lilacella, Limonitoides. And that's pretty close because this time we know what it means. Oides meaning like, Limoni, and of course Limonitis lorquini is our Lorcan's admiral. So it means it looks like the genus Limonitis.
I think it's an Apertura.
It does look like an aperture, doesn't it? Yeah. Maybe that was its larva. Then we come to the tail end subfamilies of the brushwoods, including, of course, the monarchs. And of monarchs, we saw a number of species. We saw one of the big bright blue crows, as they're called. That was in the butterfly garden. I'm not certain of the species. But this one we found a number of individuals of up by Shiksa Snow Mountain down at the foot of Napa Lake and so on. It looks almost like a monarch that's been deprived of its scales on the upper side, on the forewings. Beautiful thing, the chestnut tiger.
That's clearly.
No, it's a monarch. It's a milkweed butterfly.
Okay.
But the wings are clear. Actually, you know, I'm not sure they really are. They're
Thinly scaled.
They seem to be very thinly scaled with an iridescent scale that gave a grayish without being it. I never saw it quite as clear as a berry. You can see from the body here how much it looks like a monarch. And of course, like the other monarch relatives, it feeds only on milkweeds.
Clearwings are in the same family.
Is,
Huh?
yeah, don't be answering the deny.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. That's cool. So rice paper butterflies are one of the commonest things you see in the big butterfly houses. So if you go down to the one at Seattle Center, you'll see morphos, but you'll see lots of big rice paper butterflies. One of the most interesting things I've seen in recent years was in, here's Nectariana Weigelia. This is in the butterfly garden, by the way. We did not see this in the wild. But when I was in Okinawa a few years ago, there was a hotel that had a tiny little butterfly house by the side of it, where they grew milkweed vines, and they were raising these butterflies. The pupae are solid gold. They look like a gold drop, polished gold drop. No other color on them at all, solid gold looking. And they would all pupate on a bright green-leafed ornamental tree that they would then bring into the lobby like a Christmas tree. And when they hatched, they turned them loose outside because there was a restoration effort for this species in Naha, the capital of Okinawa. We saw them only in captivity, but they're pretty wonderful. Very big. They're milkweed butterflies, monarch relatives. As of, oh. I think I have something on one. We came to the, I never saw a snout butterfly there. There's just the one species of snout, I think, in Eurasia, unless I'm mistaken. There's a couple more in Australasia that are purple. But this one is a lot like the American snout butterfly that's very common in the south. Some years enormously. And you see why it's called the snout, because of the forward projecting Halby, had a big schnoz. But again, Paul saw one and a few, and I never did. Huh. I may have missed out a picture, but we saw two species of monarchs, the Asian monarch and the striped tiger, it's called, and they're closely related to our monarch. And so finally we come to the last butterfly that I took originally for a what? I can't remember the genus. Those white ones I've been talking about. Aporia. And naturally, and actually this one I felt better about because when we first caught it, this was on a high pass going down to Faux-Ping. And I said, good gosh, the body of this, everything about it, it's like an Arabia. It felt to me like an Arabia, like a big alpine, the satyrs, except for the coloration. Paul's the one who called this an Aporia.
Do you know what its actual affinities are?
It's a satyr.
Yeah, but I mean genus-wise.
Well, it can't be that far from Arabia.
No,
Or
Arctic
calorie.
is way away from Arabia,
Oh,
it's
what's it?
Arctic.
Well, okay.
It may even be conspecific, or congeneric with
He might,
genus.
with the Aeneases?
Every structural feature is almost identical.
That's weird because what it feels like is if you have a Magdalena alpine and then painted white on it. And the wing shape and everything, but I take your word, John.
All the morphological and DNA data.
Cool. Anyway, it's a satyr. And so what did we have? We had all these different butterflies and it has just a little bit of yellow on it. Not very much, but it does have a little yellow on there, as you can see. Now we're in the satyrs finally, my favorite group. This was a common butterfly going down the trail into Faux-Ping. Beautiful Niobe Pyle. And we would find them mostly on the concrete trail or on the moist trail sides, sipping moisture. We never saw them nectaring. Very well camouflaged and highly variable. Some of the individuals were very, very pale like this. I know it's overexposed, but it actually was pale. And then some of them were much, much darker like this. So when we, and then some were, really very dark.
Bamboo feeders.
You're absolutely right. And then when we got to Napa Lake, there were some almost black ones flying around the shore, and it had been a long way since we'd seen this species, very different habitat. And I said, well, they're clearly Niopes, but they must be something different. And they are. There are different species of Niope called Niope tigini. You could call it the black satyr. They were really very, very dark indeed. Very cool flying around that lake shore. And sipping black mud. I thought that was better focused than that. But this was one of my favorites. Those look like bird beak marks on the forewings, and you find those on butterflies commonly where a bird has grasped it and let go and it leaves the impression of the bill. You'll see that sometimes without tearing it. But they're not. That's the maculation of the underside showing through. And here's the underside. No, this is still the upper side. Here's a pretty picture. But here's the prettiest picture of all, and this is the one that appeared in Ganam.
Oh my God.
You know what? It's not, it's a good projector, it's good projection, but you're not getting, the purple's dropped out. Look at the picture in Ganam, it printed well.
No, that's a different picture.
Well, oh, you're right. Sorry, Dave. It's a different picture. Did you take this one on the front?
No, I took the one on the
Yeah, okay, that's right. Okay, I take it back. There wasn't any purple on this one. The light wasn't right, because it's backlit. Here we go. Oh, David, 1,000 apologies. Your projector is magnificent.
Is that bamboo it's sitting on?
Yes, exactly. No, that's what I was building up to, because you're absolutely right. Both those species are bamboo feeders. And this is Tia's picture. I just think it's one of the prettiest pictures from the whole trip. I love that one. But there was another satyr that we kept seeing in that same area, and nobody saw it. And I said, there's a wood nymph. There's this big wood nymph thing. And nobody could catch it. Nobody else could see it. Nobody believed me that it was really there. This isn't it. This is,
Diana. Leave it Diana.
these are probably Lethes.
I'm telling you, it's Lady Diana.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry, I was supposed to go back. I think Paul actually did identify this, and I just didn't get the name looked up, but Lethe Diana. And this is another Lethe, you think that's the same?
Probably.
Okay, anyway, and those were at a different place. And these were at Longleaf Park, there were several species of,
Get finally.
yeah, that's right, that's Ecthyma for sure. I called that at the time.
Maybe in a time also.
It may well be. But this is my wood nymph. And I was so happy because I couldn't find it and I couldn't catch it. I went back to that spot 5 times trying to find the wood nymph, and I had seen it and missed it, and nobody got a picture.
That's an aberration.
No, it's not. It's so beautiful, and we're hiking out, and Asa caught one. And then we got into it, and I caught it too. It's so beautiful. And you see Calarabia, considered at the time it was named at least to be closely related to the Arabia. I saw that at the time.
Maybe in a
Clearly
time
not
also.
that far away from our witness. But I just was so happy it finally turned out, and they had to believe me. So those are all the butterflies that we photographed. These are the ones that species we recorded and did not photograph. And I won't talk about them because it's very late. And there you see, Paul felt that he had pictures of Lethe Linaria and Lethe Britannia. Maybe those are those two, or maybe not. What do you think, Diana?
No, those are different. Diana's pretty distinctive, but it's
Okay.
more of a boreal one, so maybe you can
Oh,
look at.
okay, good. Well, I think Paul has some pictures, and if you do, that I haven't got hold of yet. I did see the wonderful big Indian red admiral called Vanessa indica flying around our research station. That was good.
The Indian admiral.
Indian admiral. And the big silver wash fritillaria was the Argenus paphia. So, nice array of butterflies. I haven't even counted the species, but we're pushing 100 species for the trip, I think. And there were, of course, larvae. That being certainly a moth. And there were wonderful moths. We did pay attention to the moths, but clearly not as much. But this is one of my favorite genera of moths. It's one of the micro moth groups called Adela, its own family Adelae. And they have the most extraordinary antennae. The moths are tiny. And this moth is a quarter-inch long at most. But the antennae can be well over an inch. Beautiful big, probably in the actual genus Saturnia.
I think it is.
I could put a picture of that.
Male. At lights at the tram station going up Shiksa Snow. This pretty little silk moth was in our dorm. And this really struck me coming down. I'm pretty darn sure it's got to be in the genus Citheronia, which is related to our regal moth of the east.
Strictly New World.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay, well, maybe it just looks like it. The larva, of which is the hickory horned dove. I'll have to take that away. But this was my favorite moth because these are my favorite moths, the hook tips. We have a picture of our local species at Sweet Park that Tia got with one little raindrop depending from the hook. But
Obviously a northwest creature, he's got rain on him already.
I know, but actually those are silver scales.
Oh, come on.
They are, just like the ones on Euctachia, or a little, Georgia satyr. Georgia satyrs have these little silver scales on them, or even Hayden's ringlet in Yellowstone will have that same kind of little silver scales. They're so beautiful. Tia's picture. And lots of geometrics.
Oh, they are, absolutely.
And that one we thought was a skipper for the longest time until we just looked at the antennae. And finally, we come to the most extraordinary moth, and of course I thought it was Aporia number 6. Hiking out from Popane, greater love hath no man, as that fly was biting my thumb. Actually, I think it was just sipping my sweat. But doesn't it look like the aporia, or that weird cedar, or that Parnassium? They all, and look, orange on the,
So you're telling me that's a moth?
that's a moth.
Look at,
You know, it must be some mimicry thing.
Oh, exactly. John's the first to say it. But all these species occur together, or most of them do.
You know what they center on? The Parnassius.
Right, exactly.
They're like glycosides and coryllas.
John's got it.
Oh, that was an accident.
Isn't that a pretty picture? But that's, see what I called it, the Parnassian mimic. And I believe that's exactly what we've got. We have a mimicry ring centered on Parnassius glacialis. And the cedar that looks like a white Arabian, and the true aporia, and that nymphala that looks like it. They all have orange, and they all basically look like that. And
Aporia may contribute to it because of brassicaceous mustard oil.
exactly, the glucosinolates.
So
And
it's
so,
Latin and the Mullerian.
so you may very well have a Mullerian mimicry complex with more than one distasteful species, all saying to the birds, take this and then don't eat another. So that's a kind of our one discovery of the trip. And it's probably already known by our Chinese colleagues, but it was very, very exciting to figure it out. So we didn't have 6 aphorias, but we had something even better. And that's part of it, and that's part of it. And that's part of it. All unrelated butterflies evolving toward a common pattern. Convergent evolution in service of survival through mimicry.
I think you got some, you know, you realize there's very few or any mimics in the old world.
Not nearly as many, that's for sure.
This would be one of the most profound.
We might even do a different paper on this.
I'm gonna bring the notion up.
Zoe was the ecotourist guide who with her husband put together the full being portion of our trip, and it was absolutely wonderful. And she and her husband came to Boulder recently and got to have a party with most of the participants in the trip. And we talked to them on the telephone. They live in, I don't remember which city they live in Massachusetts, who was our patron for the trip, and the genius loci of the whole thing. So, thank you all very much.